Hello, Heero here, and today we're gonna look at Miyabi, the first ever Voidhunter and Frost DPS that uses her unique charge attack, Frostburn breaks, and Virgin-like ult to deal big BP damage. I'll be discussing her kit, builds, engines, and possible teams. Just as a quick disclaimer though, the footage and information that will be shown is from the Creator Experience server, so things can still change when her banner drops. Let's start by discussing what the Frost element is. Well, it's very similar to the Ice element, and I mean very similar, in the sense that it still benefits from ice buffs and debuffs like damage bonuses and res shreds, and even triggers freeze, shatter, and the frostbite anomaly state. However, what makes it unique is that it has its own anomaly meter separate from the ice element, meaning it can still trigger disorders on enemies under the ice anomaly. And as part of Miyabi's core passive, it also triggers frostburn on enemies with the ice fire debuff. So TLDR, the frost element is just basically the cooler ice element. Pun intended, by the way. But speaking of her core passive, it does a couple of things. First of all, whenever Miyabi inflicts frost damage, she applies the ice fire debuff, which increases frost anomaly buildup on the target based on 100% of her total crit rate. You need 80% crit rate to get ice fire's full 80% bonus frost anomaly buildup, which makes Miyabi an anomaly among the other anomaly units. She actually benefits more from crit and attack stats than the usual anomaly proficiency, especially when it comes to her damage. Cause unlike Bernice, Yanagi, and Jane, she is attack and crit scaling, and weirdly enough, anomalies and disorders aren't her main and only damage source. So you can just think of her as a crit DPS with a bit of disorder damage on the side. But speaking of attack scaling, whenever Miyabi applies frostbite to an enemy with ice fire, it consumes the debuff to trigger the frostburn break, dealing frost damage based on 1500% of her attack and gives her 1 point of fallen frost. And like I said, this scales off her attack, meaning it also uses the standard damage formula, so yes, it also scales off crit despite being an anomaly trigger, meaning it doesn't benefit much from anomaly proficiency. Triggering Frostburn Break also triggers the anomaly status unique to Miyabi, Frostburn. Enemies in the Frostburn state receive 20% more anomaly buildup from the entire team. Just note, Miyabi can't inflict ice fire to enemies in this state, and it expires when frostbite ends or another attribute anomaly is triggered. This enables Miyabi's teammates to get anomalies and disorders faster, which is very important for higher overall damage, and synergizes nicely with her additional ability, Bask in Frost, which is activated by either having one support or Section 6 character in the team. First of all, this ability increases her charge basic attack damage by 60%, and whenever an ally triggers a disorder, it gives Miyabi 2 points of Fallen Frost, and her next charge basic will ignore 30% of an enemy's res. Of course, the Ice Res Shred also stacks with other Ice Res Shreds in the game, and if combined with her charge basic attack buff, it allows her to deal massive bursts of damage. And with its 2 bonus Falling Frost, it also helps her get level 3 charge basics faster and more consistently. Which brings us to her charge attack, Shimotsuki. You can only use this charge attack once you have at least 2 points of Fallen Frost, and with every 2 points consumed, it raises its level by 1 all the way up to 3, with the attack getting significantly stronger with each level. Her level 3 charge is one of her most damaging abilities. Looking at multipliers alone, you lose out on so much damage if you decide to skimp out and just use its level 1 or level 2. You literally lose out on almost 2500% from its multiplier by doing so. And just for reference on just how much damage her level 3 charge attack does, its multipliers are almost as high as her ults, and it's higher than any other ult multiplier in the game. I cannot stress enough how important it is to get her level 3 charge attacks consistently. Otherwise, her damage output drops by quite a bit. TLDR, her level 3 charge attacks will absolutely nuke the enemy with big PP damage, so make sure you do everything you can to get it often. And just as a quick tip, you can swap cancel to another character once you see Miyabi consume her last 2 Fallen Frost, which is pretty good for more efficient rotations, especially in quick swap comps. Oh, and just make sure not to use her ult while she's in your charging animation, since it cancels it without launching a charge attack while still consuming points. But speaking of her ult, Lingering Snow, it deals massive frost damage and does a couple of things. Every time you use it, it gives Miyabi 3 points of Fallen Frost while simultaneously buffing ice damage by 30% for 12 seconds. Not only is this Miyabi's most damaging ability, but it also provides some utility with an ice buff. And if you time it well, its bonus frost points allows you to follow up directly into a level 3 charge attack, taking advantage of said buff, allowing you to absolutely nuke enemies with an extremely high burst damage combo. As for her special attack, Hisetsu, it's a 2-part attack with a second part requiring additional energy to use. Now for the most part, this is just your standard high damage dealing skill, but each part of it does give 2 points of Fallen Frost for a total of 4 points, so it's pretty useful in getting her level 3 charge attacks more consistently. And finally, she does have a special dodge, but all it does is it lets her move farther, which is pretty good for closing gaps with enemies. But for ability prio, I recommend leveling her core skill first, then her basic attacks, then either her ult or skill, then assist, and finally dodge. Her ult does more damage, but you can use her skill more often, so it's up to you on which one you want to level first between the two since they're both rather important. But with her kit out of the way, let's talk about her Mindscapes. Her M1 allows her charge attack to ignore 6% of the enemy defense for every point of Fallen Frost consumed with a cap of 36%. And it gives the party a 20% anomaly buff for 10 seconds every time her level 3 charge attack hits an enemy with Frostburn. Just note, it does remove Frostburn from the target. As if her charge attacks aren't OP enough already, her M1's Def Ignore just makes it deal more damage, and plus, this Def Ignore pairs really well with pen ratio buffs like Rina's. And the Cleansing Frostburn is actually very good, since it allows Miyabi to trigger Frostburn break more often without really sacrificing Frostburn's anomaly build-up buff. Her M2, on the other hand, increases her normal basic attack and dodge counters damage by 30%, and she gains 1 stack of Fallen Frost after every BA5. It also increases her initial Fallen Frost count from 3 to 6 at the beginning of battle, while also giving her a permanent 15% crit rate bonus. This lets her start battle with a level 3 charge, which is pretty good in taking out the starting trash mob wave in shield defense stages. But the best thing about it is that it not only increases her on-field damage, but with the BA5s now giving Fallen Frost, it makes it easier to build up because she basic attacks a lot. This in turn makes team building for her a bit more flexible, since you won't have to worry as much about bringing units for triggering lots of disorders to build Fallen Frost. While her M4 increases her Frostburn breaks damage by 30%, and every time she triggers it, she regens her ult meter by 250 decibels. This of course synergizes with her M1, allowing for the more frequent Frostburn breaks to deal more damage, and it results in her getting her ult way faster, which with the new decibel changes, is a very welcome buff. And finally, her M6 gives her the polar buff when using her charge attack, which increases its damage by 30%, and she immediately launches a level 1 and 2 charge attack as she's charging up to level 3. This massively increases her charge attack damage, which isn't too surprising because it's an M6. The neat thing about this though, is she now unleashes her level 1 and 2 charge attacks while in her charging animation, which allows you to squeeze in a lot more damage, and of course, those also benefit from this Mindscape's 30% damage buff. And with her Mindscapes out of the way, let's talk about her possible Wenjins. Miyabi's signature Wenjin, Hailstorm Shrine, gives her 24% bonus crit rate and 50% bonus crit damage. And it gives her a 20% ice damage buff every time she uses an EX special or an anomaly is triggered, stacking up to 2 times, giving her a total ice damage bonus of 40%. This of course helps her reach her 80% crit rate stat goal easier, but the important thing about this Wenjin is that it's the only anomaly Wenjin that gives crit rate and crit damage. So I would actually recommend going for this engine over her M1, seeing how there's very few alternatives for it. Oh, and if you're a big fan of drip, this engine also gives the best drip I've seen among 5-star Wenjins. I mean, just look at it! It looks so fucking cool! But with that being said, a good 5-star alternative is Fusion Compiler. It gives a bit of attack and a lot of pen ratio, which is pretty good if you're using her with Rina and a pen ratio slot 5, since you can essentially ignore a big chunk of the enemy's defense, allowing for big damage. While a good 4-star alternative is the BP's Electro Lip Gloss. You can essentially get its attack and damage buffs almost permanently, since a majority of the time with Miyabi comps, enemies will have an anomaly status anyway. The only downsides to this Wenjin is that it's paid, and it has anomaly proficiency as its main stat. Roaring Ride is also another good option. It gives quite a bit of attack, especially at high refinement levels. And it also provides bonus anomaly build-up rate, which helps her apply Frost just a bit faster. The only problem with this Wenjin is that it's heavily RNG dependent, requiring 3 EX specials to get all of its buffs. Meaning, you have to use another EX special after her 2-part combo, which is only possible with a full energy meter, which is a lot of the time you wouldn't have. As for free-to-play alternatives, Reinforced Gourmet and Weeping Gemini are decent alternatives because they both give attack stats, with an R5 Reinforced Gourmet giving you up to a 40% attack buff, which is pretty good. But realistically, you would only get a 32% attack buff because her 2-part EX special only consumes 80 energy, which is still pretty good in my opinion. Aside from those, you also have the option of running a non-anomaly crit Wenjin like the BP Cannon Rotor, Elena Nekomata Signatures, or the 3-star Novi Luna. These Wenjin's main stats of course helps her reach her crit rate stat goal, but the downside is you don't get their passives. And if you use Novi Luna, its very low base attack can end up making Miyabi do way lower damage compared to her 4-star options. So I would only really consider these if you're having trouble getting 80% crit rate. But with possible Wenjins out of the way, let's talk about drive discs. For the 4-piece set, the new Branch and Blade song is her best in slot. It gives her a total of 46% bonus crit damage, and you don't have to worry about its activation condition, since Miyabi inherently has 116 anomaly mastery, just one over the 115 needed for this set. It also gives her 12% bonus crit rate for 15 seconds whenever Freezer Shatter is triggered, which helps her get to the 80% crit rate goal. Which of course isn't too hard to do since Miyabi applies Frost really fast, so she can keep good uptime with its buffs. But seeing how it is a new set, Polar Metal is a good alternative since it gives her 10% bonus ice damage, while simultaneously buffing her basic attack damage by 20%, which also affects her charge attacks. And if you inflict Freeze or Shatter, the damage boost gets bumped up to 40%, again, not too hard to do. Woodpecker Electro is also another very good alternative, with its bonus crit rate helping her reach her stat goal. And it also provides up to a 27% attack boost if you can meet its conditions, which isn't too hard to do. But personally, I would prefer the set for the 2-piece set. But speaking of which, her best 2-piece set would be Woodpecker Electro. Again, its bonus 8% crit rate helps her reach her 80% crit rate stat goal. However, if you're running it as a 4-piece set, or have already reached 80% crit rate, 2-piece attack, 2-piece ice, 2-piece pen ratio all work for pretty good damage. Just choose whichever has the best substats. But with their possible drive discs out of the way, let's talk about stats. For main stats, you want crit stats for slot 4, preferably crit rate, ice pen or attack for slot 5, and attack percent for slot 6. For the slot 5 main stat, it honestly depends on the team you're running. If you're running Miyabi with lighter, an attack main stat would be better since he gives so much bonus ice damage it starts to get diluted. So you'd end up getting diminishing returns with an ice slot 5, which is especially the case if you have her signature. And if you're running her with Rina and other pen ratio sources, a pen slot 5 would be really good for ignoring a big chunk of the enemy's defense, allowing for big damage. As for slot 6, for those wondering if Anomaly Mastery would be a good option for helping Miyabi apply Frost faster, well, from my experience, even without an AM slot 6, Miyabi still has a pretty fast Anomaly build-up rate because of her passive. So personally, I don't think she needs it, and an attack main stat will still be the best option. But I suggest testing things out on your own to see what works for you. As for substats, you mainly want to focus on crit rate first, then crit damage, then attack percent, then flat pen or attack, and finally anomaly proficiency. Like I kept yapping about earlier, she needs 80% crit rate to get her passive's full 80% Frost Anomaly build-up buff. And of course, this should be prioritized over anything else. And despite her being crit scaling, Anomaly Proficiency isn't totally useless. It may not affect Frostburn Break, but it does improve her Disorder and Shatter damage, so it's not a bad idea to have some, seeing how she does trigger them quite a lot. But she does have a base 238 AP from her kit alone, so there's really no need to go out of your way to get some. With her stats out of the way, let's talk about possible teammates. Mama Nagi is definitely one of Miyabi's best, if not her best teammate. Not only do they activate each other's additional abilities, both of them also enable each other's damage output so well. With Miyabi applying Frostburn anomalies really fast, combined with Frostburn's anomaly build-up buff allowing Yanagi to trigger more disorders, and Yanagi of course letting Miyabi get her charge attacks quicker. So I guess even in gameplay, Mama Nagi is stuck taking care of her pet fox. But another great teammate for Miyabi is none other than the Brain Rot Queen, Bernice. The Brain Rot Queen gives many benefits to Miyabi. She provides off-field attacks for fire anomaly build-up, which gives Miyabi more field time and access to more disorders, allowing for more damage and more charge attacks. Now, I wouldn't say she's better than Yanagi as a teammate for Miyabi, but she's very comparable in terms of performance. Sadly, Bernice can't activate Miyabi's additional ability, so you have to run her with a character like Lucy, Sokaku, or even Yanagi if you want to run her with Miyabi. Grace is also an option because she applies Electric Anomaly super fast, so she could be useful in triggering disorders to charge Miyabi's Fallen Frost. Jane and Piper also works with her. They can help trigger disorders to charge Miyabi's Fallen Frost. They normally require a bit more field time to apply anomalies, but Frostburn's buff somewhat lessens this, making them kinda viable for quick swap Miyabi teams. Caesar is one of the best supports for Miyabi. She gives her shields for more comfy gameplay, with an attack buff and damage taken debuff to enemies, allowing for more damage. But sadly, she doesn't activate Miyabi's additional ability, so you have to run her with another support or Yanagi, while Rina is also another good support. Not only does her pen ratio buff allow Miyabi to deal tons of damage, she also activates her additional ability. But compared to Caesar, Rina is a lot less comfortable to run since you actually have to worry about getting hit. But if you don't have Rina or Caesar, Lucy is a really good alternative, with Lucy technically being a free unit that gives a good attack buff. The thing about her is that she can also help Bernice apply Fire Anomaly, allowing for more disorders and Fallen Frost. And she also enables Miyabi to be ran with lighter. But speaking of lighter, he's a very good support for Miyabi with his Ice Rush Red and damage buff skyrocketing her damage significantly. However, the sad thing is, you have to run him with Lucy to have both his and Miyabi's additional abilities active at the same time, severely limiting team options. Nicole can also work if you don't have anyone else, since she does activate Miyabi's additional ability, and her defense shred can benefit Miyabi as well. And of course, other ice supports like Sokaku and Lycon are pretty good options as well, with Miyabi benefiting from Sokaku's attack buff and ice damage bonus, and Lycon's bonus stun multiplier and ice rest shred. With our possible teammates out of the way, let's cook up some teams. Now, before we cook up some teams, just note you need at least one of the characters shown in screen to activate her additional ability. But with that being said, Miyabi's best team right now would be a comp with Bernice or Yanagi and either Caesar, Rina, Lucy, or Sokaku. This team enables Miyabi to use her level 3 charge attacks very often with the frequent disorder triggers from Bernice's off-field attacks or Yanagi's polarity disorders. And of course, this team has no trouble clearing shield defense even in non-ice weak stages. I do think the Yanagi version of this comp is the better version because Yanagi does output a lot more disorders because of her polarity disorder, which of course results in faster level 3 charge attacks from Miyabi, causing huge damage. Though this team definitely has to be played in a more quick swappy playstyle in order to maximize disorder triggers and bring out both Yanagi's and Miyabi's full potential. This is especially the case if you have Rina in the team, since quick swapping is needed for Miyabi and Yanagi to take full advantage of her pen ratio buffs. Though if you want less hassle, you can always just run Caesar, Lucy, or Sokaku instead of Rina and achieve pretty good results as well. The Bernice version is of course the more comfier variation since it allows you to play Miyabi in a more on-field playstyle to take advantage of Bernice's off-field attacks. However, this team does output just a bit less disorders than a team with Yanagi in it since you won't have her on-demand polarity disorders. But the team should still perform really good regardless since Bernice herself can output disorders pretty fast. You can also play this comp with a more quick swap playstyle to help Bernice apply Fire Anomaly faster if you want even faster disorder triggers. But sadly, you can't run Caesar in this comp because Miyabi's additional ability won't be activated. But at least you can still run Rina, Lucy, Sokaku, or even Nicole in it. Another really fun comp I tried was a triple anomaly team with Miyabi, Yanagi, and Bernice. I would describe this as the mother of all quick swap teams, focus on getting as much disorders out as possible to have Miyabi nuke the enemy with as much charge attacks as she can. Now, the main problem with this comp is that it's very expensive, requiring 3 limited 5 stars, and it does not have a lot when it comes to buffs since it doesn't have a support buffer. But it should be able to make up for it with the damage from the sheer amount of disorders and Miyabi charge attacks. Now, I mainly tried this comp as a meme comp because I was kind of bored, but I was actually surprised it performed pretty well in the harder stages of shield defense, making it kind of viable. And of course, you can always just run her in a hyper carry comp with Lighter and Lucy, with both of them skyrocketing her damage due to the insane buffs both of them provide her. Just note, like I said earlier, Lucy in this team is an absolute necessity to have both Miyabi and Lighter's bonus abilities active. It's also a bit harder to get disorders to charge her Fallen Frost in this comp since Miyabi is the only anomaly unit in it. However, when you do get her level 3 charge attack, just expect it to deal massive amounts of damage. And you can also run her in a traditional mono ice comp with Sokaku and Lycon and she would do just fine. The ice benefits they give her allow her to deal big damage, which isn't really really too surprising since they are dedicated ice supports. But of course, not everyone will have some of the units I just mentioned. So I cooked up some pretty decent alternatives you can run with some budget-friendly options included. Now, these may not perform as well as her best comps, but they are alternatives that should be able to clear content just fine. But that's about it because I'm beginning to lose my voice. But there's just one last question. Is she a must pull? Whether she's a must pull or not ultimately depends on your account. She's not really a must pull if you already have multiple top tier DPSs and are satisfied with their performance in clearing content. In this case, it's a lot better to go for units that would benefit your account more. But Miyabi is definitely a must pull if you are needing a good DPS. She is a very fun and unique unit that also deals tons of damage with her Virgil-like charge attacks and ult, and in my opinion, I do think she is currently the best DPS in the game. So, you can't really go wrong with pulling for her because she's a fantastic DPS who will definitely be able to carry you through the game's hardest content. However, it is worth noting she doesn't really have a good direct alternative to her signature right now, since all of the Anomaly Wenjins are mainly focused on AP, and her best enablers, namely Bernice or Yanagi, are limited 5-star units that not everyone may have. Now, I'm not saying she's absolutely reliant on them to deal good damage, because she definitely isn't. She can be ran without her signature, or used in non-Yanagi or Bernice comps and still do relatively well. Now, I'm mainly saying this because these are some things that might influence your pulling decision or not. But in my own humble opinion, Miyabi is definitely a strong unit who will become even more valuable once she gets more Wenjin options and more units like Bernice or Yanagi, or even a dedicated support gets released. But at the end of the day though, if you like Miyabi, pull for her. Personally, I'm gonna be rolling for her because she's very pretty and fun to play. Plus, she's technically Virgil's fox child, which makes her an instant must pull for me. Alright, rip my wallet I guess. But anyway, make sure to tell me what you think about her in the comments below, and don't forget to hit me with a like and a sub.